What if I told you that farmers in Japan started turning their cows into zebras? No, not genetically. They literally painted black and white stripes on cows. And somehow, this weird idea actually showed results to a centuries-old problem. At first glance, it sounds like a joke. But behind these striped cows is a clever scientific experiment, a surprisingly elegant solution to a farming problem, and even a prize for unusual research. So today we're going to answer a strange question. Why did Japanese scientists paint cows like zebras? And why did it work? But before we get into it, just a quick reminder that if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share this video and channel with anyone you think might be interested in interesting snippets about Japan, whether it be the latest news and events, travel-related stuff, cultural differences, or just strange and funny occurrences. It really helps a lot. Cows versus flies. If you've ever been near cows in Japan in the summer, you've probably noticed something. The flies are relentless. Japan's scorching hot and humid summers create near-perfect conditions for biting insects, and for livestock farmers, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's a measurable economic problem. Biting flies draw blood, transmit disease, and keep animals in a constant state of agitation. Stressed cattle eat less. They produce less milk. They lose weight, and all of that translates into real losses for farmers. The standard response used in Japan and globally has been insecticides and chemical repellents. They work, but not indefinitely. Flies, like many insects, are remarkably good at developing resistance to pesticides over time. And beyond the effectiveness problem, there are growing concerns about chemical use in farming environments. The runoff, the impact on other insects, the accumulating costs. So, Japanese researchers, who have a long tradition of finding methodical solutions to stubborn problems, started looking for a different approach entirely. What they found seems, on the surface, a bit absurd. A weird clue from Africa. To find a possible answer, scientists looked to Africa and an animal famous for its stripes, the zebra. For over 150 years, the zebra's stripes have been one of biology's more stubborn mysteries. Why do they have them? Theories have come and gone. Camouflage? Unlikely, given that zebras live in open grasslands. Thermoregulation? Possible, but the evidence has always been thin. Predator confusion? More plausible, but still contested. The hypothesis that has gained the most traction in recent decades is perhaps the least glamorous. The stripes may exist, at least partly, to repel biting flies. Experiments in the UK and Hungary found that horseflies and similar insects have a surprisingly difficult time landing on striped surfaces. The working theory is that the high contrast pattern disrupts the fly's visual processing during approach, specifically their ability to judge speed and distance when preparing to land. The fly comes in for a landing, miscalculates, and misses. It's not a perfect defense, but it appears to be a meaningful one. So scientists in Japan had an idea that sounds ridiculous but makes perfect sense. What if we turn cows into zebras? The Japanese experiment. Researchers at the Aichi Agricultural Research Center in Japan decided to test the idea. The setup was straightforward as agricultural experiments go. 6 Japanese black cattle, a breed widely raised across Japan for its prized Wagyu beef. were divided into 3 conditions. Some were left unpainted, some had black stripes painted onto their naturally dark coats, and some were painted with white stripes, creating a genuine black and white zebra pattern. Then the researchers observed. They counted the number of biting flies landing on each cow at regular intervals. They also tracked what they called fly repelling behaviors, the tail flicking, leg stomping, ear twitching, and head shaking that cattle use to dislodge insects. Anyone who has watched cows on a summer day in the Japanese countryside knows exactly what this looks like. It's essentially continuous. The experiment was small in scale, deliberately so as a proof of concept study, but the consistency of the results across observation periods was enough to draw conclusions. The zebra-striped cows attracted roughly half the number of biting flies compared to the unpainted animals. That figure alone is striking, but there was a more interesting detail buried in the data. The cows painted with only black stripes, stripes on an entirely dark coat with very little contrast, showed no significant benefit. This mattered. It told researchers that the effect wasn't simply about pattern or novelty. It was specifically about the contrast between black and white. Without that contrast, the visual disruption that confuses the flies apparently doesn't occur. The striped cows also performed far fewer defensive behaviors throughout the observation period. They were calmer, less reactive, standing more quietly in the field while their unpainted counterparts continued their endless battle with the insects around them. Why stripes confuse flies? The leading explanation comes down to how biting flies navigate. These insects rely heavily on visual information when approaching a landing target, particularly polarized light and motion contrast to judge their approach, speed, and angle. A solid colored surface, even a dark one, gives them clean visual feedback. The landing is straightforward. A high contrast striped surface, however, appears to introduce noise into that process. The alternating black and white creates a kind of optical interference that disrupts the fly's ability to calculate its final approach. It doesn't stop them from trying, but it stops many of them from succeeding. The analogy that comes to mind is a runway painted in alternating stripes that somehow scrambles the instruments of every incoming aircraft. Most of them can't quite stick the landing. Why this matters? The practical implications are more significant than they might first appear. Japan's livestock sector has been under sustained pressure in recent decades. Rising feed costs, aging farmer populations, stricter environmental standards, and growing consumer interest in how animals are raised. The idea of reducing chemical use while also improving animal welfare, though something as simple as a painted pattern, fits neatly into a broader conversation already happening across the industry. The researchers themselves acknowledge that painting cows daily is not a realistic long-term solution. What they proposed instead was patterned coverings, coats or leg wraps designed with high-contrast stripes that could be fitted to animals during peak fly season. Lightweight, reusable, and chemical-free. It's the kind of incremental, practical innovation that tends to come out of Japanese agricultural research. Not a dramatic reinvention, but a carefully tested idea with clear applications. The zebra has spent a few million years field testing this particular design. Luckily for all involved, it turns out that this patent has expired. What the Aichi team demonstrated is that the underlying principle, visual disruption as an insect deterrent, transfers. The animal doesn't need to be a zebra. It just needs to look like one, at least from a fly's perspective. It remains one of the more quietly elegant experiments in recent agricultural science, and it was awarded an IG Nobel Prize. Or is it an Ig Nobel Prize? I'm not sure the pronunciation. but it's the annual recognition given to research that first makes you laugh and then makes you think. In this case, probably in that order. If you found that interesting, there's plenty more where it came from. Please subscribe to Tidbits from Japan for more stories about the ideas, discoveries, and quiet innovations coming out of everyday life in Japan. And leave a comment with your answer to the obvious question. Would you put a zebra coat on a cow if it actually worked? Farmers watching this, your answer counts double.